Okay. Well, welcome to the CyberFortress and Veeam 2024 Data Protection Trends and Prediction webinar conversation we're going to have here today. I'm going to go ahead and just pause for another moment while we let folks log in. So if you wanted to hop up and grab a drink or other things, you can do that. And then Dave and I will get started with some intros here shortly, and then we will walk through what we see going on for 2024 in the backup and recovery market. Okay, I will start with an introduction to myself. So I'm the CEO of CyberFortress, a 20-year internet security professional. Started working back on the internet in California, out in the Bay Area during the first internet boom, doing what we called network security back then. Ran a security operations center, worked in an R&D lab. And throughout my career, I've worked in cloud computing, hosting, internet infrastructure, backup and recovery, and a risk management professional. So you can ask me questions today all about things that you would expect an information systems auditor to know, or even down into some of the technical zeros and ones. While I don't code often these days, at least on anything that gets into our production environments, I do still stay current on these things. So we should be able to share some good information about not only the high level market overview, but maybe some of the things we're seeing down in the zeros and ones as well. And with that, I'll hand over to you, Dave, to introduce yourself.
Thanks very much, Brett. Hi, I'm Dave Russell, Vice President of Enterprise Strategy in the Office of the CTO here at Veeam. And I'm one of the most uninteresting people you'll ever meet, 34 years in backup. So I only have about 30 more years to go.
And for those wondering, the guitars behind Dave, those are real. He did build the panel. That's not a virtual background. So with that question out of the way, you can ask questions as we're going through the meeting here today. Dave will grab those and bring them up, and we'll answer as we work through. So if there's something about the content that we're covering, you can ask right away. If there's even just something that's coming to mind, go ahead and ask that over chat to Dave and to us as hosts, and Dave will figure out when and where it'll be good to get that in, but we will do our best to get every question that y'all have answered today. So first up here, I think we're seeing a lot of challenges globally. I mean, there's two hot wars going on around the world right now, and then still just a lot of geopolitical instability. Kind of Cold War wise, you have major political changes. We're going to have a major election in the US in 2024. So all of these things that are happening outside of the IT realm and the geopolitical world create opportunities for hackers to exploit the people inside of your IT systems. Folks will get stressed out. Folks will get worried. Folks will be maybe in a hurry. They're going to be doing things that they would normally slow down and double check. And with that, I think that there's a belief that there's a large cyber event that happens in the next couple of years, bigger than ones we've seen for a while. Maybe if you go back to some of the large scale ransomware outbreaks that either affected things like Colonial Pipeline on the northeast coast of the US and had a spot where maybe we wouldn't have fuel at gas stations, or some of the other ransomware attacks where different software tool vendors were exploited, and for some countries in Europe, 25% of their grocery stores weren't able to take delivery and sell groceries to folks for a couple of weeks. So those sorts of things of cyber attacks spilling over into the real world, or the type of things that were talked about at that World Economic Forum annual meeting. This isn't just cyber attacks of data inside of a data bubble. This is cyber attack that leads to an event that impacts people across a broad level. Dave, what do you have kind of thoughts about this one, and what are you guys seeing from the Veeam lens here?
Yeah, what you described is real. And, I hate to use the phrase collateral damage, but it's true in this context, meaning people, individuals, like you say, aren't the intended target, meaning the average citizen, civilian, someone outside of the data center. But just referencing a couple of reasonably recent events, one of which you mentioned having to do with oil, the attack didn't stop the ability to deliver oil. What was attacked was the billing system. So the company made the decision to stop moving oil because they couldn't monetize it. If you think more recently in Las Vegas, there were some casinos that were hacked a few months back over the United States summer. And what people found is if they were inside of the casino staying there, suddenly their hotel key didn't work. It wasn't that that system got breached, it's that the casino made the decision to turn off all systems until they could start to vet each one individually to make sure it hadn't been compromised. So what you had there was not even the attacker trying to go target a certain system, activity, or a persona, but literally the cure actually created certain side effects such that others were impacted.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I had forgotten about that summer one in Vegas. It brings me back to attending DEF CON and Black Hat back in the days, where the hotels were often paranoid to have a digital system at all. The primary hotel we stayed at stayed on a physical key system for a long time because, yeah, they were concerned that their guests there may not be so hospitable to an electronic key system. So next up, we're going to talk about some of the changes in landscapes and what goes on with recession. With this, I think there's going to be budgetary pressures across. While IT spend is likely to grow, you're likely to see from your executive overall team pushing down and asking, are there ways that you can be more efficient with your data backup and recovery in 2024? And with this, you've got the spots where sometimes the executive leadership is going to understand what a recovery point is. They're going to understand what recovery time is, or they'll spend the time to listen so that you can explain those and explain some of those trade-offs and threats. And I'll use the Colonial Pipeline one again as an example, so that because a bunch of this data went out and became public. So they had backup of all of their servers across that infrastructure when they were ransomware. The backup, though, they had been kind of budget squeezed for year after year after year. And for those of you that are backup and recovery professionals, you know the faster that backup restore happens, the more that backup costs. Well, so what they'd been doing is they were backing up all the data, but they had been slowing down the way that backup was occurring and their ability to recover over the years to where getting all the systems back online was going to take them more than 30 days. And if you've got gas stations running out of fuel in 4 days, that doesn't help to be able to get the systems back online in 30. So I think this is going to push some challenging conversations in 2024 where you may have to tell leadership, like, there's a couple of options here. We can continue to back up all the data, but we may not be able to get it back in the time we need it. Or there may be certain sets of the data inside of our business. We may have to choose to lower our level of retention or not back up at all in order for us to be able to continue to recover those primary tier one systems in the time frame that the business needs so it can continue to operate.
Yeah, I think what you mentioned there, Bret, is a really important distinction to double click on, which is in that one example, it wasn't a case of the system failed and there was no ability to do what was asked, which was to restore the data. It was there was no ability to bring it back in the desired time frame. And a lot of times I like to say that, service level agreements are something that's a little more formalized. Those are rising and they're probably increasing year on year, if not even more frequent than that. But service level expectations, the demand and the view of the ultimate consumers or a business's partners oftentimes even exceed SLAs. So the important takeaway is it's not that the IT system couldn't achieve the operation. It's just there was no tenable way to do that in a way that would work for the business.
Yeah, I really like the words you used there, Dave, of service level expectation. And this is one that often folks, when they're looking to a vendor, a software provider, a backup as a service provider, a network provider, you ask for service level guarantees, you ask for SLAs, those assurances. But I think internally, you should use that kind of language of service level expectation with your departments that you're serving to provide that backup and disaster recovery solution to. It'll help you on your vendor selection. It'll help you cascade and flow those things down. But it'll also just give you a simple way to have a conversation around ultimately what's really important for the business owner of that application. They've got an expectation of the service you're providing to allow them to recover it, when it's going to be back online, how much data are they going to lose, what's that recovery point in there. All of those pieces are things that you can have around that conversation for an expectation.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is one where I think some folks had asked me some questions on LinkedIn and things before our webinar. So I'm going to go on a little bit of tangents here to talk some about artificial intelligence and how I look at the threat landscape there as AI relates to both to backup and recovery, but systems overall. So I think there's going to be, depending on the size of your organization and the pace at which your organization looks to adopt artificial intelligence, there's going to be a set of internal threats for that. And I'll cover that in part two. The first part I'm going to talk about, though, is the external threats. So for a business to adopt artificial intelligence to use some type of business process automation, effectively is all AI is. It's a business process automation where you don't have to be very specific. You can talk to it in natural language terms. So you're effectively, that AI is going to do tasks that you may have done with a software developer or a database administrator or a data integration tool in the past. You may now have AI performing some of those tasks. For a business to be able to adopt it, we have to be sure that the AI is going to be able to operate at the appropriate quality level for any of those processes. For a criminal, the AI can screw stuff up all the time. As long as the AI costs the criminal less to operate than the output of the AI when it does get things correct for that cyber criminal. So if your AI 15% of the time writes bad email content in a phishing campaign, if it's writing these emails and it's allowing the criminals to replace humans to do things in a more personalized manner, it's much easier for them to adopt and use artificial intelligence because they don't have to worry about the cases where it does something incorrect, where if you've been following any of these GPT systems, the large language model based systems, they have the ability to what they're calling hallucinations, where they just make things up. I'm going to call it lying. They lie. So they really are becoming artificially intelligent because humans lie too. And so when they lie, businesses have to worry about that if it's internal in your own processes or it's communicating something to your customers. The cyber criminal doesn't have to worry about it lying. It doesn't have to worry about getting things incorrect. So I think we're going to see substantial adoption by cyber criminals to improve the quality of phishing campaigns, to even do things like password guessing. So let's say that you really wanted to hack into my system. So I'm now a person of interest, and you're a criminal, and you take that AI and you go have it crawl the internet for all of the information you can find about me. And then out of that, you use it to then go try to generate and guess passwords based off of all the internet information you found about Bret. That won't work against me because I use a password manager. And so it's not going to help it guess random 16 or 24 or 32 character strings. But a lot of folks use passwords that are tied to information about them, words that they might use in their language, other things. And if that's the case, and that's the way that you're selecting passwords, and you're a target of interest for some of these AI systems, I think they're going to be able to much more efficiently guess passwords than humans have been able to in the past. So that's just one kind of thing I think we're going to see. And then on the second part is this internal risk. So you have two pieces in this internal risk. So where you have layoffs, if those occur, those always drive a risk for insider threat. When people get laid off, they are more likely, maybe if someone had reached out to them to try to bribe them before, or other things to get them to cause harm to their employer. They may have told those folks no in the past, and as soon as they get a layoff announcement, they may be willing to call that hacker back up or that criminal organization and say, sure, if you give me the $25,000, I'll download all of the source code out of our system and send it to you. So as you see, if layoffs are necessary, and if AI is driving that, you've got the layoff activity, but then you've got the AI replacing it afterwards. And so this is the second thing. If you've been following in the GPTs and the language models, you can also then trick these language models to break their own rules. So if you're allowing customers to directly interact with an AI, if you're putting this AI in the case of a business process where it's going to be dealing with information that you don't necessarily have complete filtering and control over up front, I think you're introducing a set of unknown risks into the system. So if we go back to the days of stack overflows and buffer overflows, and those type of exploits where then people would get a shell access on a system, I think you're going to see these AI systems where there's a set of safeguards. The AI is only supposed to talk about a certain set of things, and people are going to find sort of magic canaries and other things to be able to get that AI to break out of its rule set and then start exposing training data or other things, or get it to do activities and behaviors that it shouldn't do. So this is one of those spots where I think AI is going to be a big driver of risk in 2024 and beyond. As these systems are rolled out and as we're adopting effectively a new big technological wave, that there's going to be a business desire to do it for increased speed, service quality, and efficiency. And on the cyber side, we're going to be that team that gets to say no. And in many cases, though, we're going to get vetoed by the needs of the business, and we're going to get told, I understand you're saying no. I understand you're saying there's risks. We accept those risks and move forward. And then regrettably, though, what y'all as backup recovery and cyber professionals, you're likely to be the ones at the other end of that later when you don't get to ever say, I told you so. When that risk that you brought up turns into reality, you just get to say, I'm sorry that happened. The team's working on it. We're going to go get it fixed for you, sir or ma'am. Dave, what are you guys seeing in AI from a Veeam perspective, either out there where it's changing things, or AI feature requests even coming into you from a roadmap perspective?
Yeah, I want to hit that. And while we're here, I want to harken back to the slide before. We got a question that came in from Ross that kind of hits this as this notion here, as well as really budgets we were talking about. And the question was, hey, the budget process is over for 2024. Having missed this window, how do you assist prospects to find budget for new services in 2024? I'll take a stab at this, and then I'll get back to you exactly the question you answered, Bret, but you feel free to chime in on Ross's question here. What I would say, Ross, is overall, there's always exceptions, but and I in real time brought up some Gartner and some IDC data. If I blend the two, just using this year, overall IT spend was up approximately 4%. On average, security spend was up 5.6%, and recovery, what we're talking about here, availability, backup recovery, disaster recovery, was up 5.5%. So there is hopeful likelihood that your budget was increasing in this area year over year. However, I get your point. You know, what the allocation has already gone through, been assigned. What can we do? One thing that I would suggest is having the business revisit the importance of allocating or reallocating potentially appropriately. What I mean by that, which is part and parcel to you point, Bret, is everyone's willing to take the risk until they're not, right? it sounds good when there aren't any immediate consequences, but when there are immediate consequences, suddenly people have a different viewpoint. Well, to Ross's point here, one of the things that we found at Veeam, we did a survey of 1,200 organizations that actually got hit by ransomware, and they're not Veeam customers. Less than 4% are Veeam customers, by the way. So it's worldwide. It's not just using one product, et cetera. The bad news is that even people that paid the ransom, a quarter of those still couldn't get the data back. I mean, that's a double whammy. That's insult to injury, right? I got hit, so you were down for a period of time. You have to presume the board authorizes you to pay the ransom. More time goes by, you still can't get the data. The reason I mention all that, Ross, is I think education goes a long way. Playing rather the lottery of it won't happen to us, but if it does, it won't be so bad, isn't really very viable statistically, meaning the odds are really not in your favor. And when it does hit, the odds really aren't in your favor again, that it will be done, remediated in a timely manner or even at all. What are your thoughts, Bret, in terms of how could an organization have a conversation about potentially reallocating 2024 budget?
Yeah. So I mean, and I've worked for going all the way up to AT&T. We had over 300,000 employees when I was there. So very large company. We started our annual budgeting process in August for the following year. And in organizations like that, I think there are sort of two buckets. There's one, well, you do want to get everything in and done and solved next year. You may, at this point, depending on what it is, need to actually start planning and socializing for 2025 projects already at the end of 2024. But the other piece, and I think that if you've got a business risk that is identified outside of that budgeting cycle, the finance department and then legal, and in there, as a large company, you'll have a board that'll have an audit committee, but that audit committee also often is responsible for going through on a quarterly basis, not just the financial numbers, but the risks to the business. Looking at, does the business have the appropriate level of insurance? Is it doing things in a way that are commercially reasonable to protect the company against threats? And if those threats emerge and you weren't aware of those threats when the budgeting process went through, if it's a real threat, I think this is one of those ones to bring up. If it's something that's new, that's you see from your perspective, but it wasn't one that you saw at the time of the process. Now, as a technical operator, you also do have to balance this a bit in the piece of the kind of chicken little side of things, because operators, we always want more budget to solve all the things perfectly. So there is a balance there. And I think that this is for you to have those conversations with your manager and then ultimately up through to the executive leadership about the credibility. And if you come into these conversations with data, with risk, with where you go through and you have identified a business process that the business does need to be back online in 48 hours. And right now, you found out as you went through and you were doing an audit on systems, you realize it wasn't 48 hours. It's actually 2 weeks for us to get back online. I think those are ones that if you surface that sooner rather than later, then at least at that financial and executive level, they have the option to say, you know what, we are going to move some money around in the 2024 budget to address that, to get that recovery time down to the 48 hours that we would like to see. Or at that point, you've at least communicated it, and it's not a surprise in the event that that risk and that system does have an issue. And then folks aren't in the false belief that they were going to be back online in 48 hours when you knew it was 2 weeks. So I think it is an iterative conversation process, but the larger your company gets, the more structured it gets. This may be one where 2024 is already set and planned and mostly chiseled in stone, and you're starting conversations about 2025.
Yeah, good point. And going back to what you mentioned on AI, there's been one kind of common, I guess, saying that I actually like a lot, and one of the things that we're seeing at Veeam, which is the need to use good AI to combat bad AI. So, you have to assume in the near future, gone are the days where you get a very ridiculous looking spam email phishing attempt, right? The misspellings, the verbiage doesn't really make sense. Sort of that proverbial Nigerian prince wants to leave you a great deal of money if you just give him a little information. That's far more likely to be replaced in the near future about a very targeted spear phishing attack. It knows Brett by name. It knows you just went skiing with the family because it found that on social media. It's saying, hi, my name's Joe. Saw you were in Telluride the other week. Hey, I've got this great opportunity I'd like to tell you about, how you could save on your next lift ticket. And it's like completely legit looking, and it's mentioning tons of details. Maybe it even actually could mention other people's names in there. I know you went on a vacation. You were at Telluride with Dave. He wanted me to pass this along to you. So there's a case of where bad AI is going to get a lot more targeted, a lot more sophisticated. Good AI, and one of the things that we did just a couple of weeks ago at Veeam, we released a capability to be able to look at, as we ingest data, look at the entropy of what's the risk associated with the data that it's in production, what we're backing up now, look to see if there's anomalies such that we can alert an administrator earlier. This is a bad recovery point, or this is a suspect recovery point. Go investigate this while you still can, meaning before there's actually an incident.
Yeah, no, I think that's getting predictive intelligence into products and platforms. I think is one that I'm hearing from customers across the technology landscape. Because predictive analysis there is like you heard Dave say on that. The AI is not making a decision. The AI is analyzing information, then coming back to a human and saying, I believe that this is at risk. You should go look at this. So it's doing that entry level filtering through a massive amount of information and identifying things. And I think that's where us on the good guy side will get to use AI to really enhance some of our monitoring and log management and alerting capabilities. I think AI as the actual implementer of certain tasks where it is still very risky from my perspective in 2024 without a human involved in the process to validate the response from the AI before it's delivered to an external party or it's allowed to modify settings on a system. So everyone thought ransomware was over, but not really at all. And this is one of those ones where I think Gartner coined the hype cycle, and you've got that curve you go through where everyone's talking about stuff, and then by the time people stop talking about it, that's generally when it's actually mature and causing more problems for more people than it ever did during that initial hype wave. So I think ransomware really started in being a thing as far back as almost a decade ago now. Certain different types of ransomware, they really started to ramp up when there were cryptocurrency ways for the ransom to be collected. And now, though, where we're headed into 2024, this is going to be one of those years where this might be a little bit of a boring prediction, but I believe that dollar amount and number of attacks for ransomware as the vector in 2024 is going to be bigger than 2023. And the data we've got here is 2023 was almost double 2022, and I think we're going to continue to see that trend growing. The other thing that we're starting to see now is a lot of folks are putting backup and recovery strategies in place to where they want to be able to tell the ransomware attacker to go pound sand. You know what? I've got a backup. I've tested it. I know my recovery points. I know my recovery times. I'm going to be able to get my things back online in a way that makes our business happy, and we're not going to go pay you. So what we're starting to see as well, and you can go look on the search engines, but these criminals are now exfiltrating the data. So the ransomware attacks early on, they were just getting into the environment, encrypting the data as it sits on the system, and they were not exfiltrating that data. So there was no data breach. Now, because they know some people have backup recovery strategies in place, that ransomware is getting into the system, and then the ransomware is analyzing the data, potentially using AI, trying to find what are the high value assets inside of the target, exfiltrating those assets out so that when you tell them, no, I'm not going to pay the ransom, they go, well, if you don't pay the ransom, I'm going to dump all of your data on the dark web. So forget, it's nice you've restored and you bypassed our encryption locking of your files, but you're going to have a data breach and a data dump to deal with unless you pay us. So this is one of the things that I think with a kind of a continuous and real-time backup strategy, and then tying that into monitoring and alerting, you can, if a ransomware does get in, you can catch it quickly. That can be yet another tool inside the system that will allow you to see it, quarantine it quickly, and limit the size and scope of a potential data exfiltration. I do believe that if, as a business, you don't have some type of data exfiltration, alerting, and reporting in place, that 2024 and beyond are going to become very challenging because the hard part for us is being good guys. We have to be right all the time, and the attackers only have to find one flaw. So the years of every business being perfect, I think is impossible. Everyone's going to have some level of risk in there, and these hackers will find it. And when they do find it, they're going to use both ransomware to encrypt it on the system as well as to exfiltrate it for a second vector to be able to collect money from you as a target.
Yeah, well said. And, the issue with exfiltration is that it's not a one-time thing, meaning that just because you even pay the exfiltration request or really the extortion doesn't mean that it can't be used against you again or any number of times. So it becomes a real issue. And I think you hit it well. And our next slide starts to double click on that. The antidote is try to reduce the time frame of which you're compromised.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think this is, we've talked about it through a few of the pieces here, but I believe that 2024 for the good guys, this will be the year that there are monitoring, alerting, log management tools that start to make very productive use of AI. They're enterprise where you can train them internally on your own data sets, and they can start to help you identify risks, create alerts that can then be investigated by skilled personnel on the team, and that skilled personnel, that expert, can then determine, is this a false positive or not? But in the event, and I think with the tuning back and forth of the AI, there's going to be opportunities to tell the AI, only send me stuff that you're super confident that this is a real issue, and you're going to get a low amount of false positives. Or you'll be able to tell the AI, send me everything that you think might be concerning, and you'll get more false positives from it. But just like tuning your own log management and other alerting systems, a SIM platform or other service architecture and management platforms, you'll be able to tune the AI agents up and down inside the environment, and you're going to see more products available in 24 than you've seen in 23. And I believe that some of them in 24 will provide business value above and beyond the kind of cost of implementation. In 2023, I think it's a lot of experimenting, a lot of trying stuff. If somebody's already getting business value out of an AI inside your risk management platform today, I think you are well ahead of the curve. But I think in 2023, the just super early adopters are getting stuff. 2024, it's going to be that early majority. And as we go through this over the next 5 years, I think it's going to become a mature technology where if you don't have some type of AI helping you on incident management, information gathering, log processing, that you will start to be a laggard and behind the curve.
Yeah, and I think that becomes really important, Brett, because while there are targeted attacks, the Sony hack comes to mind, there are many, many, and I would argue the majority of cases which are just crimes of opportunity. So it's perhaps even unknown who the victim is, who was compromised. It's an IP range. It's literally hundreds of thousands of phishing emails that were sent out there. So what this really means is trying to make yourself both less of a target upfront, but also less of a target ongoing if you should have been infiltrated, such that AI, if it can reduce the gap in any way, ideally upfront before bad actors really get in, but then containing them before they're able to laterally move, escalate privileges, etc. If I were to net that out, you want to use all the tools at your disposal. And to your point, more and more coming online all the time to make yourself less attractive as a target.
So, I think this is a good one just to talk in an area about the evolving threat landscape, and where if we go back to where our systems were pre-internet era, they were only people that were on the systems were employees of the company, or if we gave a business partner a login and access to a certain system. So the thing that you had to worry about in that world were accidents where somebody deletes the wrong thing, they use the system incorrectly and cause a problem in it, and or equipment and systems failure. So you kind of had the accidents and hardware failure, and maybe natural disaster if you've got a facility level problem. Now, as we're connected, all of our systems are generally internet connected at this point. Even a lot of our critical infrastructure is internet connected. Some of that critical infrastructure they're taking back off of the internet because of this evolving threat landscape. But with this, you now are not only restoring from those accidents, you're dealing with attacks, and those attacks are attacking the data privacy of your customer data in many cases, and with laws ramping up around this across many jurisdictions, the proactive security and spending on that privacy and protection, if you aren't doing some things in those areas, this is back again. While not an attorney, I'll talk in a little bit of a perspective, I think, on my view as an expert in the industry. We have to make reasonable efforts to protect things. If you don't make reasonable efforts to protect against known risks, this is where then the courts, especially in the consumer privacy areas, can hold the business accountable, can through the different laws in different jurisdictions. There are fines and other things that can happen if reasonable efforts are not being made to protect against known risks and threats. One of the other ones as well, and this is, I think, one of those things where your data backup solution can be helpful, is in the data inventory and data classification. So there are a number of tools and services where you can have it scanning, looking for PII, looking for certain types of file formats, looking for things so that you can identify them across the organization, and then look at determining, do those files need to have that type of information? Is there a way that we can store them in an additional higher security setting, maybe where access to those records require a separate dual authentication and a dual approval to be able to decrypt them and those sorts of things. So this is one where I think your backup tools can help you identify some data privacy and related risks if you have a solution that has some advanced features. But this is one where backups are not enough, because we're not just dealing with accidents and system failure anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to, we've had a couple questions and comments come in. Want to give a shout out to Emma, who she mentioned a couple of things, one of which is really around the increasing difficulty of understanding on phishing emails, if it's legitimate or not. You mentioned some tools that are helpful in a phishing test. That's an interesting concept, Brett, because we've talked about AI or tools, and that ability to use tools in advance to test prior to incident to try to strengthen your security posture ahead of time, certainly something that has to be considered. Very, very specific question. Ross had another follow-up, which was, is Veeam or CyberFortress encrypting the data at rest? I did a reply there, but I wanted to mention it to everyone. Yes, data at rest and in flight, the data is encrypted, and there is the ability for immutability on your copy or copies of data as well, such that if I were to net that out, but we're not transmitting data in the clear. We're not storing it in the clear. In fact, there is no employee on either company's part that could go and read that data, meaning an administrator couldn't just, with supposed rights to the disk volume, be able to suddenly look at that data and get something out of that.
Yeah, and this is one where I get to have some awkward conversations with many customers at different points in time. On the encryption platforms and then the way you're encrypting data. So we do a bunch with like file system level encryption, encryption in transit using HTTPS or TLS, however you want to talk about that, and other things to encrypt the data in transit between customer system and our cloud platform. But in many of the configurations on our cloud platform, the customer is the custodian of the encryption keys. We do not have a copy of those keys. We don't want a copy of those keys. This keeps your backup set stored with us, even from an insider threat. There's no way for any of our employees to be able to access the data ever. So like if you're going through a compliance audit, it's super easy. We can just tell them that the CyberFortress employees do not have access to the encryption keys, and so they cannot decrypt the data, and therefore we're not a data processor, we're not a custodian, we're just a data storage provider, and we can then return those encrypted chunks of data back to the customer at whatever speed and things that we've set up and talked about from a recovery time. But we don't have access to the keys. And those awkward conversations sometimes I have with customers is, my system got hacked and I want to restore. And I go, well, here's your restoration. They're like, everything's encrypted. Do you have a backup of my keys? And in many of those cases, in a high security environment, we're not storing a copy of the keys, and that's called out clearly. So this is one. With your backup as a service provider, DR as a service provider, data archive provider, if you have one, make sure that you're real clear on who is the custodian of the keys. Is it dual control where both of us have it and both of us have keys that can decrypt the files? Is it where the customer is the only one with them? Is it the one where maybe the service provider has it and we're going to be accountable in that case for decrypting it before returning it to you? So be real clear around who is the custodian of the keys in that encryption scenario, because there have been a lot of times where customers are like, well, just crack the encryption. And I'm like, sorry, we're using AES 256. If you've got a method to crack that, I have a different business I can start, but it's not one where I'm providing the backup to you. I don't have a method or idea on how to break an AES 256 encrypted data store at this point. So yeah, on the question as we went through about this related to encryption, and then physical access to the systems. This is, I think, where Dave was talking. Your provider likely is in a data center that has gone through SOC 2, and they've got physical security controls and those sorts of things. If they don't have those controls, that's, I think, something else to be concerned about. But physical access to a physical hard drive, you're going to have multiple layers in almost all cases of encryption there, of the actual operating system running encryption. Maybe if it's a storage system connected to that, there's some encryption tied to that. There's encryption up at the Veeam level or other backup software where you have encryption keys managed there. And those are all permanent at-rest encryption sets. And then you've got separate ones where that encryption in transit is created and destroyed in real time.
Yeah, a couple of interesting questions have come in, but I want to hit this one. I think we've addressed it, but it was, how do you address offsite or air gap backup requirements? Is that still needed in a 2023 plus time frame? But we kind of touched on immutability, offsite by nature of the solution that we're jointly providing. You do get offsite data. It is by definition or baked in an air gap solution, which really brings the next question, which is, what does CyberFortress do versus Veeam? How do you handshake?
So I guess we'll talk through on a Veeam solution. So we're providing the offsite cloud backup copy for backup as a service. So customers are already in that product with us, running Veeam inside their own data center, and then we are their offsite backup copy provider. We also do disaster recovery as a service because sometimes your recovery time objective is 90 seconds. And if there's only an offsite copy of the data and there isn't an offsite copy of all of the application infrastructure and all the rest of that, you're not coming back online in 90 seconds or 5 minutes or 50 minutes. It's most likely if you've got terabytes of data and you look at the amount of time it takes to flow that over the internet, it's quite a while. So in a provider like us, so we take and build the CyberFortress cloud platform. Inside of that CyberFortress cloud platform, then we take Veeam software, and that's kind of the engine inside of the car chassis, to use a car analogy here, where Veeam provides us that backup and recovery feature set that we use inside of the cloud platform. But we're picking the data center providers, we're picking the hardware that it runs on. Veeam's got a big list of approved hardware solutions. And then we have a team of product engineers and operations engineers that when Veeam rolls out a new release, we test that against the way our platform is set up. We then roll and deploy that. We work to stay in sync with our customers there. So like 12.1 just came out recently, and we're going through getting that upgrade done so that our customers that want to take advantage of new features in 12.1 can go do that. But we do an additional set of testing above and beyond what Veeam does. And while Dave would love to say Veeam software is perfect, and we'd all love to say all of our software is perfect, every set of software has issues. So we work with them, and we have a bunch of different use case tests we go through, and we'll find things and escalate that back to Veeam's product team. We have Veeam vanguards and things that work for us that get early access to things. So we'll work with them before things are released to fix and resolve issues before they ever make it even to a dot release or a major release that goes out to the general use to where it can be shared with all of our employees and can be shared with all of Veeam's customers. So we handle the running and operations of that. On the immutable air-gapped cloud backup, this is one where I think you've got to go through and do a data classification and data inventory. So I'll just, we can all pretend here for a moment that we're sitting in a room and we all work for Intel, because everyone knows who Intel is. They make chips that go into a bunch of our computers. And so if you're going through, and we were sitting doing a risk assessment at Intel. So Intel's got the fancy files that they store that have all of the little line traces and all the things that are needed to make that chip. And so that's stuff that they can't ever lose. That if they lost all of that chip architecture, all of those digital files of the chip architecture, and there was not a recoverable copy of it, I think that would be a potentially catastrophic event for the business, for them to have to go back from scratch and try to have all of their employees recreate all that stuff out of their head. I don't even know if it's possible. I don't work there, but we can all, I think, reasonably theorize that it's not possible to if you lose something like that. So in that sort of case, like even 321 is not good enough. I mean, they should be doing multiple copies. Some of those should be air-gapped for sure. They should be on different types of media. They should be stored physically in different places. So you've got something like that is like really the crown jewels of a company. And it really is the core thing that allows that company to exist and operate. That stuff, you should have a whole bunch of scenario modeling if you're in a company as big as Intel, and I'm sure their security team goes through all these things to make sure that you never lose that data so that the company can continue to operate. And then all the way down to stuff like Joe went and took an employee out for a pizza lunch yesterday to talk about quarterly projects that they were working on, and Joe's got a $17 receipt, and there's a digital copy of that receipt stored. Well, if the company, like, do you need an air-gapped copy of that $17 receipt at the pizza place? Probably not. So I think this is one where you've got to go through and do that data inventory and data classification to know what the correct level of risk management and what the correct level of backup and recovery protection you need in place for the data.
Brilliant. I've been answering a couple of the questions in real time. Do want to give a shout out to this email address at sales@cyberfortress.com, sales@cyberfortress.com. You can follow up with some of the items. So Tina, that one's a shout out to you and to another as well. And also from what you just described, Bret, in terms of the interaction, there is a diagram that we can share. You can use that same link, sales@cyberfortress.com. It shows what the Veeam interaction with CyberFortress is and how it can be appropriate for your environment. But yeah, let's wind down on, looking ahead here.
Yeah, so 2024, I think if you get pressure from business decision makers inside your organization to just turn the AI loose, you can tell them you talk to a pretty experienced risk management professional and cyber expert here today. And I even have a few patents around some different AI things. So you'll see down there at the bottom, normally I don't read the words on a slide, but I'm going to read these ones. Humans must remain the key decision makers in 2024. It doesn't say here humans should, or in most cases, humans must. I really believe that you have to have humans in 2024 as the key decision makers. AI is not ready for prime time in the spot where it is making and executing its own decisions at this point.
Brilliant. And I love the collaboration notion there. That's probably one of the greatest pieces. And it's very much related to what you just mentioned there, Bret. Keep the human chain of custody alive and well, but also don't try to do it by yourself. That's one of the challenges is sometimes, ironically, the bigger the organization, the bigger the company, yes, you may have more people at your disposal from an IT perspective. The downside can become that you might find yourself with more silos. Definitely encourage you to work across those upfront as well as on the back end to try to overcome that. This is really something that affects everyone, just as everyone in the company, doesn't matter if you're in IT or not, everyone has a role to play in security.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. Appreciate that. Well, with here, yeah, you've got our contact info. You can find both of us on X down there. Those are our handles on that service. You can reach out to us through sales at CyberFortress. If you've got follow-up questions for either Dave or I, the team there will get those to us and we will get you an answer. And then there's a QR code on this screen if you want to take a look at the playbook for recovering faster from disasters. You can scan that QR code and pull down that playbook. But with that, we've got about 5 minutes here left for questions. Dave, are there any else sitting in the queue right now?
I think we've hit them all in real time because, nicely, the questions were coming in very well related to what we were discussing. But just give a basically last parting shot on my end would be what we've described could sound a bit daunting. The negative consequences certainly are. And while I like to say it's nice to be optimistic, the reality is, yeah, it's good to be optimistic, but you better be realistic because the numbers and what we've seen to date and all early indications for 2024 and beyond are that this is absolutely not going away. It's going to get more sophisticated. You need to prepare. And that's really the last notion I would say, Bret, is in a world where there's scarcity. We had one of the first questions talk about budget allocation already being decided upon. You may not be able to do everything, but you can do something. So if there's any one takeaway from this webinar, it's hopefully do something to put yourself in a better cybersecurity posture. And CyberFortress and Veeam are here to help you do that.
Thank you very much for joining us today, Dave. Thank you all for attending. And yeah, one last wrap up here in closing, and then we'll go ahead and exit this webinar and wish you all a happy set of holidays. Hopefully, a little bit of downtime so you can get into those 2024 projects and hit the ground running in January. But really appreciate you coming on, Dave, sharing some of the stats and things that you had there from Gartner and from the research that Veeam did with your survey.
Yeah, thank you, Brett, and thanks to CyberFortress and everyone for tuning in.